"I want the 5 Porsches," said the simple woman. Everyone laughed without knowing who they were dealing with. Melissa Johnson pushed the glass door of the dealership with her shoulder, adjusting the heavy backpack on her back. Her clothes were covered in road dust. The faded cap protected her tired eyes from the harsh Los Angeles sun. She stopped for a moment, observing the 5 yellow Porsches perfectly aligned in the illuminated showroom. "I want to buy these 5 cars," she said, pointing at the vehicles. A strange silence fell over the place. 2 salespeople who were chatting near the counter turned to look at her. One of them let out a muffled laugh. The other nudged his colleague with an elbow, trying to hold back laughter. Melissa felt heat rising to her face but kept her posture straight. "Excuse me, are you lost?" asked one of the salespeople, a young man no older than 25, with too much gel in his hair. "I'm not lost. I came here to buy the 5 yellow Porsches. Do you sell them or not?" The laughter was now open. 2 more salespeople approached, drawn by the scene. A middle-aged woman, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, looked Melissa up and down with an expression that mixed curiosity and disdain. "Honey, do you know how much one of these cars costs?" asked the saleswoman, her tone making it clear she believed she was being generous by not immediately throwing her out. "I do. That's why I'm here." From the back of the dealership, a man of about 50 approached. He wore an expensive grey suit, shiny Italian shoes, and had an air of superiority that seemed as much a part of him as his own shadow. It was Richard Sullivan, the general manager of the dealership. Known for his arrogance and the pleasure he took in humiliating customers he considered unworthy of stepping on the imported marble of the showroom. "What's going on here?" His voice cut through the air like a blade. "This lady wants to buy the 5 Porsches, Mr. Richard," explained the young salesman, barely containing his laughter. Richard observed Melissa from head to toe. His eyes scanned the worn backpack, the dusty clothes, the worn-out boots. A scornful smile formed on his lips. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This is a luxury vehicle dealership. Perhaps you're looking for the toy store. It's in the mall 2 blocks from here." The salespeople laughed openly now. Melissa felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. She took a deep breath, putting her hand inside the backpack. "I can pay," she said, pulling out a crumpled envelope. Richard didn't even look at the envelope. He made a gesture with his hand as if shooing away a fly. "Of course you can," he said, sarcasm heavy in every word. "Security, please escort this lady to the exit, and be careful she doesn't dirty our floor any further." A large man in a black uniform approached. He seemed embarrassed but obeyed. He lightly touched Melissa's arm. "Please, ma'am, let's avoid trouble." Melissa pulled away from the touch. "Wait. Just listen to me for a minute. I walked 3 days to get here." "3 days?" Richard let out a laugh. "Oh, that explains the aroma." More laughter. Melissa felt her face burn with shame and anger. "I walked 3 days because this is the only dealership in Los Angeles that has exactly these 5 specific Porsche models. I checked. I called all the others. Only you have the 5 models I need in the exact colors." "What a wonderful coincidence," said Richard, still smiling. "And why exactly do you need 5 specific yellow Porsches?" Melissa opened the envelope with trembling fingers. From inside, she pulled out an old photo, faded by time. She showed it to the manager, but he didn't even look. "This is a promise I made to my husband." Her voice trembled. "Before he—" She couldn't finish the sentence. She swallowed hard, trying to control her emotion. "Your husband must have good taste for impossible dreams," commented Richard. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have real clients to attend to. Security, please." The security guard hesitated. There was something about that woman's dignity, even covered in dust, that made him uncomfortable about touching her again. "Sir, maybe we should at least look at what she has in the envelope," he suggested. "Are you telling me how to do my job?" Richard turned to the security guard, his eyes flashing. "Do what I paid you to do or find another job." Melissa put the photo back in the envelope. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from a deep anger that was beginning to grow inside her. She had been through a lot in the last few years. She had endured worse humiliations. But this time, it wasn't just about her. It was about Michael. It was about the promise she had made to him when the doctors said the chances were minimal. "It's okay," she said, her voice firmer now. "But before I leave, you need to know something. I worked 20 years as a cleaner in William Parker Sullivan's house." The silence that followed was different. Richard froze. William Parker Sullivan was the owner of the dealership network, a powerful, reserved man whom few knew by his full name, much less by his mother's maiden name. "How do you know that name?" asked Richard, his voice losing some of its arrogance. "Because I cleaned his house for 20 years. I took care of his children when they were little. I was the only employee who stayed when his wife was sick. And before I left, he told me that if I ever needed anything, I should just look him up." Richard regained his composure. He crossed his arms. "What a convenient story. And do you have any proof of that?" "I have his personal number." "Then give me the number. I'll call right now." Melissa recited a number from memory. Richard took his cell phone and dialed. He waited. He hung up. "This number doesn't even exist anymore. You made up this whole story. Pathetic." "It's been 3 years since I left his house," explained Melissa. "He must have changed his number, but I worked there." "That's true." "Of course it is." Richard made a dismissive gesture. "And I'm related to the Queen of England. That's enough. Get this woman out of here before I call the police for disturbance." The security guard, more firmly this time, took Melissa's arm. She didn't resist. She let herself be led to the door, but before leaving she turned one last time. "You're going to regret this," she said, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. "I'm trembling," laughed Richard. Outside, in the parking lot under the strong midday sun, Melissa finally let the tears fall. She sat on the curb, the heavy backpack beside her. She had walked so far. She had planned everything so carefully. And now... "Excuse me." She looked up. A young man in his 20s, wearing a blue jumpsuit stained with grease, was standing next to her. He had kind eyes and was holding a bottle of water. "Do you work here?" asked Melissa, accepting the bottle. "I'm a mechanic. I work in the back workshop. I saw everything through the glass." He sat on the curb beside her. "I'm sorry for how they treated you." "It's not the first time I've been treated like that. It shouldn't happen even once." Melissa drank the water in long gulps. She was very thirsty. The young man waited in respectful silence. "My name is Jason," he said finally. "Melissa." "Can I ask you a question, Melissa? That envelope you showed, I saw it from a distance. It looked like serious documentation." "It's stock transfer documentation." Jason leaned forward, interested. "Stocks? Of what company?" "Copper Canyon Mining Co." The young man thought for a moment. "Never heard of it." "No one has. It's a small company from the countryside of Arizona. My father worked there his whole life as a prospector. When he passed away 15 years ago, he left these shares to me. At the time, they were worthless. The company was practically bankrupt." "And now?" Melissa looked at the envelope in her hands. 3 weeks ago, they discovered a mineral reserve, high-quality rose quartz in commercial quantity. The news hasn't been made public yet, but the shareholders have been notified. I am... She stopped, still not believing the words she was about to say. "I'm the largest individual shareholder of the company." Jason's eyes widened. "Are you saying that the shares my father left me, the ones I kept in a box under the bed for 15 years without ever looking at, are now worth..." She took a deep breath. "The company's lawyer said they're worth about $42 million. The young man fell silent, processing the information. "And you came here to buy 5 Porsches?" "Not for me." "What? For a promise?" She took the photo out of the envelope again. It was an old photo from over 30 years ago. It showed a young couple smiling in front of a simple auto repair shop. The man was tall, handsome, with bright eyes full of dreams. The woman beside him, younger, looked at him with a love so evident it crossed the decades. "This is my husband, Michael. This photo was taken the day he opened his own shop, 32 years ago. He was 23. I was 21. "He's a mechanic?" "He was. He..." Melissa stopped, her voice breaking. "Sorry. It's still hard to talk about it. Jason gently placed his hand on her shoulder. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. No, it's okay. I think I need to tell someone. She wiped away tears. Michael always loved cars, since he was a child, especially Porsches. He worked at a big shop here in Los Angeles, fixing luxury cars. Whenever a Porsche came in, he would spend hours observing every detail. He had a notebook where he drew the models he loved the most. He drew cars. He drew and wrote about them, every specification, every technical detail. It was a passion, but we were always poor. He earned little at the shop. I worked as a seamstress at home. We could barely pay the rent. Buying a Porsche was an impossible dream. But he had 5 favorite models. Melissa nodded. 5 specific models from different years. He said these were the most perfect ever created. He spent hours showing me the drawings, explaining why each one was special. I pretended to understand, but I really just loved seeing the passion in his eyes when he talked about it. She stopped speaking. A shadow crossed her face. Jason waited. 3 years ago, Michael started having back pain. We thought it was just fatigue from work. He spent all day bent over engines, but the pain got worse. It became unbearable. When we finally managed to schedule an appointment at the health center, almost a year had passed since the first pains. Jason felt a tightness in his chest. The doctor ordered tests. When the results came, Melissa closed her eyes. There was a tumor in his spine, benign but very large. It was compressing the spinal cord, that's why the pain. The doctor said if he didn't operate soon, Michael would permanently lose the use of his legs. But were you able to get the surgery? Through Medicare, the wait was over a year. Michael didn't have a year. In 6 months, maybe less, the damage would be irreversible. We needed urgent private surgery. It cost $120,000. And you didn't have the money. We didn't even have $1,000 in the bank. I tried to get loans from every bank. None would lend to us. No collateral, no co-signers. I sold everything we had of value. My sewing machine, our furniture, even the old television. I got $10,000. I was desperate. Melissa wiped the tears that were now flowing freely. That's when I went back to Mr. Williams' house. It had been 2 years since I left. He welcomed me with a hug. I told him everything. Without hesitation, he gave me the $120,000. He said it was a gift, not a loan, that I had taken care of his family when they needed it, and now it was his turn to take care of mine. So Michael had the surgery. He did. It was 2.5 years ago. The surgery was very complicated. The tumor was intertwined in the spinal cord. The doctor said there was a 50% chance of success. The night before the surgery, Michael was terrified. Not of dying, he said, but of waking up unable to walk, of becoming a burden to me. Jason listened in silence, completely absorbed in the story. I held his hand all night in the hospital, and it was that night that I made the promise. I told him that if everything went well, if he survived and could walk again, I would find a way to buy those 5 Porsches he always dreamed of. He laughed. He thought I was joking, but I was serious. And the surgery. Melissa took a deep breath, the weight of all the pain from that moment coming back strong. Michael survived, but when he woke up from the anesthesia, he couldn't move his legs. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The silence that followed was heavy. Jason didn't know what to say. Melissa continued, her voice hoarse with emotion. The doctors said there was nothing more to be done. The damage to the spinal cord had been permanent. Michael would be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He was only 47. I'm so sorry. In the first few months, he fell into a deep depression. He didn't want to talk to me, he barely ate. He would spend hours looking out the window of our small apartment. I went back to work as a seamstress, but the money was barely enough for the bills and his medication. We had to ask for help to buy the wheelchair. How did you manage to overcome it? It wasn't easy. There were days I thought I would lose him. Not to death, but to sadness. Michael is a proud man. He always worked since he was 14. He always supported our home. Suddenly, he couldn't do anything anymore. He felt useless. But something changed? It did. It took almost a year, but it changed. One day, I found him in the bedroom, with that old notebook of Porsche drawings open on his lap. He was looking at the pages and crying. I sat beside him, and he told me something I will never forget. He said he was crying not because of the wheelchair, but because he realized he had wasted so much time dreaming about cars he would never have, that he forgot to enjoy what really mattered, which was being able to walk, being able to work with his own hands, being able to hug his wife standing up. Jason felt a lump in his throat. That day, we made a deal. He would stop mourning what he lost and start living with what he had, and I would renew my promise. Even if he couldn't walk anymore, even if he could never drive, I would buy those 5 Porsches. Because that promise wasn't about the cars. It was about showing him that our dreams still mattered, that he still mattered. And the stocks. 3 weeks ago, I received a registered letter. It was from the lawyer of Copper Canyon Mining Co. At first, I thought it was some scam. But the lawyer came to our house in person. He explained about the discovery of the quartz reserve. He showed the documents. He said that the stocks my father left, the ones I had forgotten in a box, were now worth millions. Did you tell Michael? Not immediately. I was in shock for days. I couldn't believe it. I had the lawyer repeat the information 3 times. I asked to see the official documents. When I finally accepted it was real, I sat down with Michael and showed him everything. How did he react? He didn't believe it at first either. He thought I was being deceived. But when he saw the official documents, when the lawyer came back and explained everything to him again, Michael cried, not from joy over the fortune, but because we could finally pay all our bills. We could have an apartment adapted for the wheelchair. We could live with dignity. And you remembered the Porsche promise. Melissa smiled for the first time. That same night, I took out that old notebook with the drawings and started researching. I discovered that the 5 specific models Michael had drawn were rare. It took me 2 weeks calling dealerships across the country. Finally, I found out that this dealership had the exact 5 models, all yellow, which was his favorite color. It was a miracle. Or maybe it was fate, and you decided to come in person. Yes, I wanted to do this alone. Michael doesn't know I came here today. He thinks I'm visiting a cousin in Santa Monica. I wanted it to be a surprise, that when the cars arrived, he would see that I had kept the promise. But you said you walked for 3 days. I walked on purpose. It might seem strange, but I needed that time. I needed to think about everything we've been through, about all the years of struggle. I left our home in Glendale and walked here on foot. I slept in hostels along the way. It was my way of honoring the journey, of making every step of the promise count. Jason was impressed. You're an amazing person, Melissa. I'm not. I'm just a woman who loves her husband and wants to keep a promise. And now? After all that arrogant manager threw you out without even listening. Melissa looked at the dealership building. I don't know, maybe I should leave and look for another store. But these are the only 5 units that exactly match Michael's drawings. It took me so long to find them. I don't want to give up. Jason stood up, offering his hand to help her up too. Then don't give up. Come with me. Where to? Back inside. But this time I'll be with you. Jason, you'll get in trouble. That manager might fire you. He might. But there's a difference between me and those people inside. I know what it's like to struggle. My mother raised me alone. We worked our whole lives in tough jobs. I know a real person when I see one. And you're real, Melissa. Your story is real. And if I can do anything to help, I will. Melissa hesitated. But how? They've already decided I'm an imposter. Let me see these stock documents. I work with vehicle paperwork every day. I know authentic documentation when I see it. She opened the envelope and showed him the papers. Jason studied them carefully. They were official documents with stamps, signatures, registration numbers. There were also bank statements showing the stock transfer and their current valuation. This is real, he said, his voice full of certainty. Very real. And there's something else. Look at this date here. The stock valuation was done just 5 days ago. That means the information about the mineral reserve isn't public yet. You received this information before the market. The lawyer said it would only be publicly announced in 2 weeks. So you're sitting on a fortune that nobody else knows exists yet. Jason returned the papers. Let's go in. And we're going to make that arrogant manager swallow every word of contempt he said. They walked back to the dealership. As they approached the glass doors, Melissa felt a mix of nervousness and determination. Jason pushed the door firmly. The place was busier now. Some well-dressed customers were examining the cars. The salespeople moved around with their professional expressions of interest and friendliness. Richard was talking to a middle-aged couple near one of the yellow Porsches. When he saw Melissa entering again, this time accompanied by Jason, his expression instantly changed to anger. "What's going on here?" He marched toward them. "I told you to leave." "And I came back," said Melissa, her voice firmer now. "Jason, what do you think you're doing?" Richard turned to the young mechanic. "Return to the workshop now or you're fired." "With all due respect, Mr. Richard, I think you should listen to what this lady has to say," Jason replied calmly. "I don't need to hear anything. Security." The same security guard from before approached, but there was hesitation in his steps. "Sir, perhaps we should at least check the documents she has. It doesn't hurt to look." "Are you two challenging me?" Richard was red now. "Both of you are fired. Get out of my dealership now." "What's the problem here?" A new voice cut through the tension. Everyone turned. A man of about 60 had just entered the dealership. He wore an elegant but understated suit. He had graying hair and observant eyes that seemed to assess every detail of the situation. There was something about him that commanded immediate respect. "Mr. Kenneth," Richard completely changed his tone, "I didn't know you were coming today. Everything is under control here. Just a minor incident with a person who—" "Richard, I asked a question. What's the problem?" Kenneth Thompson was one of the main investors in the dealership network, a respected businessman known for his integrity and business vision. He was there for a meeting with the owner, but had arrived early. "This woman," Richard pointed at Melissa with disdain, "came in here claiming she wanted to buy 5 Porsches. Obviously she can't afford them. I'm just removing her from the establishment." Kenneth walked over to Melissa. He observed her for a long moment. He saw the dusty clothes, the worn backpack, the face marked by fatigue. But he also saw something more. He saw the dignity in her posture, the determination in her eyes. "What's your name, ma'am?" he asked, his tone respectful. "Melissa Johnson." "Mrs. Melissa, may I ask why you want to buy 5 Porsches?" "To fulfill a promise I made to my husband." "A promise, I understand." Kenneth turned to Richard. "And why are you trying to remove her without even hearing what she has to say?" "Mr. Kenneth, with all due respect, it's obvious she can't pay. Look at her." "I am looking. And I see a lady who had the courage to enter a luxury dealership and make a specific request." Kenneth turned back to Melissa. "Mrs. Melissa, do you have documentation that proves your ability to pay?" Melissa handed over the envelope. This time, someone actually looked. Kenneth took the documents and began examining them carefully. His expression changed subtly as he read. He checked the stamps, the signatures, the registration numbers. "Copper Canyon Mining Counters," he murmured. "Pink quartz." Richard took a step forward, trying to see the documents. "Mr. Kenneth, what are those papers?" "They're shares in a mining company from the interior of Arizona, and from what I'm seeing here, shares worth a considerable amount." He looked at Melissa. "Are you aware of the value of these assets?" "I am. The mining company's lawyer explained everything to me." "And you intend to use these resources to buy the vehicles?" "Yes, I can make the bank transfer today if necessary, or I can wait for the official release of the funds in 2 weeks when the announcement is public." Kenneth folded the documents and returned them to Melissa. "These documents are authentic. And if the information here is correct, ma'am, you have more than enough to purchase not just 5, but 20 Porsches, if you so wish." An absolute silence fell over the dealership. Richard turned pale. The salespeople who had laughed minutes earlier exchanged uncomfortable glances. Melissa remained calm, holding the envelope against her chest. "Mr. Kenneth, Richard tried to speak, but the words failed him. "You what, Richard?" Kenneth's voice was cold now. "You judged this lady by her appearance. You laughed at her. You tried to humiliate her in front of everyone, and you didn't even have the decency to look at the documents she tried to show you." "But, sir, she looks—" "She looks what? Poor, tired, and that gives you the right to treat her with disrespect." Kenneth was clearly irritated. "I built my fortune from nothing. I know very well that appearance doesn't define a person's character or worth. Mr. Kenneth, I apologize. I didn't know that. Exactly, you didn't know. And instead of finding out, you chose to assume. You chose to judge." He turned to Melissa. "Ms. Melissa, on behalf of this company, I offer my sincere apologies for the treatment you received. This does not reflect our values." "Thank you," said Melissa, her voice soft. "If you are still interested, it would be my greatest pleasure to personally assist you in purchasing the vehicles you desire." Melissa looked at the 5 yellow Porsches lined up in the showroom. She thought of Michael. She thought of the sketchbook. She thought of the promise. "Yes, I do. I want all 5 cars." "Then let's go to my office. Richard, arrange for coffee and water for our client, and have someone bring a comfortable chair." "Yes, sir." Richard was visibly shaken. Jason approached Melissa and squeezed her hand. "You did it," he whispered. "Thank you for believing in me." "I will always believe in people like you." Kenneth guided Melissa to an elegant room at the back of the dealership. It was a private office, overlooking the showroom through a large window. He offered her a comfortable armchair and sat behind the desk. "Before we process the purchase, I would like to hear your story, if you don't mind," he said. "Not out of curiosity, but because I believe there is something special behind this purchase." And Melissa told him. She told him about Michael, about the years of struggle, about the illness, about the surgery, about the wheelchair. She told him about the promise and about the drawings in the old notebook. She told him about her prospector father and the forgotten shares. She told him about the 3-day walk. Kenneth listened to everything in silence, only nodding from time to time. When she finished, he had tears in his eyes. "You know, Miss Melissa, I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've sold thousands of cars. Cars to rich people who barely look at the vehicle before signing the contract. Cars for people who collect them like toys. But never, in all these years, have I sold a car with a story like yours. The cars aren't for me. They're for him. To show that even in a wheelchair, even without being able to drive, he still deserves to have his dreams come true." "And what did your husband say when he found out you were coming to buy the cars?" "He doesn't know. As I said, he thinks I'm in Santa Monica visiting a cousin. I want it to be a surprise." Kenneth smiled. "A wonderful surprise. We will take care of every detail. The cars will be prepared and delivered exactly as you wish." They spent the next hour finalizing the details. The payment transfer, the documentation, the insurance, the delivery. Melissa explained that she wanted the cars delivered in front of her building in Glendale on a Sunday morning, when Michael could see them from the window. "It will be done exactly like that," Kenneth assured her. When everything was settled, Melissa got up to leave. She was exhausted, but there was a lightness in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. "Mrs. Melissa, one last thing," said Kenneth. "I'd like to meet your husband. If he allows it, I'd like to visit you and hear more about these designs and your passion for Porsches. I'm sure he'd love that." Outside the room, Richard was waiting. He approached, his face marked with shame and regret. "Mrs. Melissa, I need to apologize for my behavior. It was inexcusable. I treated you with disrespect and arrogance. I have no justification." Melissa looked him in the eyes. She saw a man who had finally learned a lesson. "We all judge by appearances sometimes," she said. "What matters is recognizing when we're wrong. If there's anything I can do to make it up, there is. You can promise that next time a simple person comes in here, you'll treat them with the same respect you'd give a millionaire, because you never know who's really in front of you." Richard swallowed hard and nodded. "I promise." Melissa walked to the exit. Jason was waiting for her in the parking lot. "How did it go?" he asked, excited. "I bought all 5 cars. They'll be delivered on Sunday." "That's amazing. Michael is going to be over the moon." "I hope so," she smiled. "Jason, Can I ask you a favor? Anything. On Sunday, when the cars are delivered, I'd like you to be there. You were the only person here who treated me with kindness. I'd like you to be part of this moment. It would be an honor. Melissa took one of the cards Kenneth had given her with his phone number and address. Here. Sunday, 9 in the morning. Jason put the card in his pocket. I'll be there. They said their goodbyes. Melissa started walking back home. This time her steps were lighter. She still had a long walk ahead, but it didn't matter anymore. The promise was being kept. When she got home, it was already night. Michael was in the living room in his wheelchair, watching television. "How was the visit to your cousin?" he asked. "It was great. We talked a lot." "You look very tired. You should have taken the bus back." "I like walking. It gives me time to think." Michael pulled her into a hug. "I love you, Melissa. You know that, right?" "I do. And I love you too." That night, lying in bed next to Michael, who was fast asleep, Melissa looked at the ceiling and smiled. Sunday was coming, the day when 32 years of dreams would become reality. The next few days passed slowly. Melissa was anxious but tried to hide it from Michael. She made up an excuse for them to be home on Sunday morning. She said she had hired a technician to check the apartment's electrical wiring. On Sunday? Michael found it odd. Technicians don't work on Sunday. This one does. It's a special favor I managed to get. Saturday night, Melissa could barely sleep. She kept imagining Michael's expression when he saw the cars. Would he believe it? Would he understand the meaning? Sunday dawned with a clear blue sky. Melissa woke up early, made breakfast, helped Michael get dressed. They had coffee together, chatting about trivial things. Michael noticed she was restless. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, it is. Why do you ask?" "You seem different. I can't explain it. More happy, maybe." "I'm just happy to be with you." At 8:50, Melissa's phone rang. It was Kenneth. "Mrs. Melissa, we're on our way. We'll arrive in exactly 10 minutes. Everything is prepared as we agreed." "Thank you." "Michael, can you come to the window with me?" Melissa asked. "What for?" "Just come, please." He maneuvered the wheelchair to the living room window, which faced the street. Melissa stood beside him, holding his hand. "Mel, what's going on?" "Just wait." At 9 sharp, Melissa saw the cars turning the corner. 5 yellow Porsches in a convoy driven by professional drivers. They stopped perfectly aligned in front of the building. Jason was there too, along with Kenneth. Michael saw the cars and his face went pale. "Melissa, they're Porsches." 5 yellow Porsches. "They're your Porsches, Michael. All 5 models from your notebook. I bought them all. I kept my promise." He turned to her, eyes wide with shock. You're joking, right? This isn't real." "It's real. Every word I said that night at the hospital was true. If you survived, I would buy these cars for you, and I did." "But how? Where did the money come from?" Melissa took the envelope she had kept secret and showed it to him. She explained about the stocks, about discovering the reserve, about her father's inheritance. Michael listened to everything in silence, tears streaming down his face. "You did this for me," he whispered. "I did. Because you deserve it. Because your dreams matter. Because I love you." Michael pulled her into a tight hug. They cried together, holding each other at the window while below, the 5 yellow Porsches shone in the morning sun. "Can I go down and see them up close?" he asked, like an excited child. "You can. They're yours." Melissa helped Michael down to the street. Neighbors were starting to come out of their apartments, drawn by the unusual sight. Kenneth and Jason approached. "Mr. Michael, it's a pleasure to meet you," said Kenneth, extending his hand. "Your wife told me about your passion for these vehicles." Michael shook his hand, still unable to believe what he was seeing. Thank you. I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything. Just enjoy this moment." Michael approached the first Porsche. It was a 1985 911 Carrera model, exactly like in his notebook. He ran his hand over the bright yellow bodywork, his fingers trembling. "I always dreamed of touching one of these," he said, his voice choked. "I've fixed so many over the years, but I never could actually have one." "Now you have 5, said Melissa. kneeling beside his wheelchair. He looked at each car: the 1985 911, the 1992 928 GTS, the 2001 911 Turbo, the 2016 Cayman GT4, and the 2019 718 Boxster GTS. Exactly the 5 models he had drawn in his notebook over the decades. "How did you know which were the right models?" he asked. "Remember that old notebook you always kept? I studied every page. I noted every specification. It took me 2 weeks to find these exact models." Michael covered his face with his hands and cried openly. They weren't tears of sadness, but of an emotion so deep it couldn't be contained. Melissa hugged him, letting him release all those years of postponed dreams, of stored hopes, of passions never fulfilled. Jason approached discreetly. "Mr. Michael, I know you can't drive, but if you'd like, I can take you for a ride. I'm a mechanic and I drive very well." Michael looked up, his eyes still wet with tears. "You would do that?" "It would be an honor." And so Jason helped transfer Michael to the passenger seat of the 1985 911. Melissa folded the wheelchair and put it in the trunk. Michael was beaming, touching the dashboard, feeling the leather upholstery, breathing in the unique smell of that car that had always been an impossible dream. Jason started the engine. The characteristic roar of the Porsche engine reverberated through the quiet street. Michael closed his eyes, savoring that sound he knew so well from his years at the workshop, but had never heard from inside the vehicle. "Are you ready?" asked Jason. "More than ever." They drove off slowly, taking a lap around the neighborhood. Melissa stood on the sidewalk watching the car disappear around the corner. Kenneth approached her. "You did something very special today, Mrs. Melissa." "I just kept a promise." "It was much more than that. You restored a man's dignity and dreams. That's priceless." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. When Michael returned from his drive, his face was lit up in a way Melissa hadn't seen in years. There was life in his eyes again. There was hope. "Mel, it was incredible," he said as soon as he got out of the car. "I can't explain it. It's like a part of me that was asleep has woken up. I'm happy, honey. But 5 cars," he shook his head. "What are we going to do with 5 Porsches? We can't even drive most of them." Melissa smiled. She had already thought about this. "Actually, I have an idea, but I want to talk to you about it first." In the following days, Melissa and Michael spent hours discussing what to do with the cars. It was Michael who suggested the idea that eventually took shape. "You know, Mel, I spent years teaching mechanics to poor kids in the neighborhood for free. They'd come to the workshop where I worked, and I'd show them how to fix cars. I always thought if I'd had someone to teach me when I was young, maybe my life would have been different. You want to teach mechanics again? Not just me. We can create a program, teach underprivileged youth how to work with cars, and not with just any cars, with Porsches, with luxury vehicles, so they can see there are no limits to how far they can go if they have knowledge and dedication." Melissa loved the idea immediately. "We can keep one of the cars for ourselves and use the other 4 for the program." "Exactly. And I can supervise everything. Even from the wheelchair I can teach. I can pass on all the knowledge I've accumulated in 30 years working with engines." They talked with Kenneth about the idea. He was excited and offered help. He said he knew a space that could be adapted to serve as a mechanics school. And Jason, the young mechanic who had helped Melissa, volunteered to be the lead instructor, working under Michael's supervision. "I've always wanted to do something like this," said Jason. "Teach what I know to those who really need it, and with vehicles like these it will attract attention. It will show young people that mechanics isn't second-class work. It's a noble profession." The program was named Dream Workshop. The news spread quickly through the Glendale neighborhood. Young people from humble families began to sign up. The first class would have 20 students, aged between 16 and 21. Melissa rented a large warehouse that was completely renovated. Half the space would be dedicated to theoretical classes. The other half would have professional workshop equipment where students could work on the Porsches under supervision. Michael was radiant. He had a purpose again. He spent hours preparing the curriculum, thinking about how to teach every aspect of automotive mechanics. Even from his wheelchair, he was able to move around the warehouse, supervise, teach, inspire. But not everything was perfect. The financial reality soon became apparent. Renovating the warehouse cost much more than Melissa expected. The professional equipment was expensive, and maintaining 4 Porsches between insurance, maintenance, and parts was extremely costly. 3 months after starting the program, Melissa did the math and realized something worrying. Even with the stock fortune, the money wouldn't last forever if they kept spending at that rate. The stocks hadn't been officially sold yet. The process was taking longer than expected due to bureaucratic issues at the mining company. One evening, she sat down with Michael to talk. "Honey, we need to talk about the program's finances. It's costing a lot, isn't it?" He already knew. "It is, much more than we planned. If it continues like this, in a year we'll have spent almost half of the stock money. And we haven't even officially started classes yet." "Then maybe we should reconsider," said Michael, the disappointment clear in his voice. "Maybe 4 cars is too many. We could sell 2. I don't want you to give up on your dream. It's not giving up, it's adapting. We can still do the project with 2 cars. It'll be smaller, but it will still impact lives." But Melissa didn't want to give up. She started researching ways to make the project financially sustainable. That's when she discovered incentive programs for social projects, companies that offered sponsorship for educational initiatives. She prepared a detailed project and started visiting companies. Most received her politely but refused. A project teaching mechanics with Porsches seemed too extravagant, they explained. Why not use common cars? Melissa always responded the same way. Because the extraordinary inspires. Because when a poor young person sees they can work with the best, they start to believe they can achieve the best. But the refusals continued, company after company. Melissa began to feel discouraged. Maybe Michael was right. Maybe they needed to scale down the project. It was during one of these visits that she met Margaret Wilson. Margaret was the director of social responsibility for a major vehicle manufacturer. She was 63 years old, with graying hair tied in an elegant bun and eyes that had seen a lot in life. When Melissa entered her office to present the project, Margaret watched her carefully. "I know who you are," Margaret said before Melissa could even start speaking. "You do? I saw your story on social media. The woman who bought 5 Porsches to fulfill a promise to her husband. It went viral a few weeks ago." Melissa didn't know that. Someone at the dealership or a neighbor must have posted about that Sunday, and the story spread. "I didn't know it went viral." It went quite viral, and do you know why? Because it's a real story. Of true love, of overcoming, of not giving up on dreams. Margaret leaned forward. "Tell me about the project you're trying to create." Melissa presented everything. The concept, the objectives, the financial challenges. Margaret listened to it all in silence, making occasional notes. "Do you know why most companies refused your project?" Margaret asked when Melissa finished. "Because it seems extravagant?" "No, because they didn't understand the essence. They saw expensive cars and thought of showing off. They didn't see what you saw, that quality tools teach quality, that working with the best raises the standard of expectation. So you understand." "I understand, and more than that, I believe. Our company will sponsor your project." Melissa was speechless. "But there are conditions," Margaret continued. "We want the project to be expanded, to serve not 20 but 100 young people per year. We want a system of full scholarships created, including meals and transportation, and we want the top students to have job opportunities in our dealership network after graduation." "That would be amazing, but the cost—" "We will cover it. We're talking about an investment of $2 million per year for the next 5 years. Renewable if the project shows results." Melissa felt tears streaming down. It was more than she had hoped for. Much more. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Margaret stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city below. "Because I was one of those poor young people once. My father was a mechanic. He died when I was 15. He left my mother alone with 4 children and no source of income. A businessman who knew my father gave me a scholarship. I paid for engineering college by working nights in a workshop." She turned to Melissa. I am where I am today because someone believed in me when no one else did. Your project is the chance to do this for 100 young people. How could I refuse? The two women embraced. 2 generations, 2 stories of struggle, united by a common purpose. With the sponsorship secured, the Dream Workshop project took off. The warehouse was expanded. More equipment was purchased. A kitchen was installed to serve lunch to the students. A transportation system was organized to pick up and drop off the young people from their homes. The first class began 3 months later. 20 young people, all from poor neighborhoods, all with difficult stories. Some had unemployed parents, others lived with grandparents. There were those who had already been through the juvenile justice system. But they all had one thing in common. They wanted a chance. On the first day of class, Michael positioned himself in front of the class, his wheelchair in the center of the space. The young people looked at him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. My name is Michael Johnson, he began. I'm 50 years old. 2.5 years ago, I became paralyzed from the waist down due to complications from surgery. Before that, I worked for 30 years as a mechanic. He paused. I know what some of you are thinking. What can a guy in a wheelchair teach about fixing cars? After all, I can't even get under a vehicle. The young people glanced at each other, uncomfortable. The answer is I can teach everything, because mechanics isn't just about physical strength. It's about understanding systems. It's about solving problems. It's about having patience and attention to detail, and those things I can still do better than when I had 2 working legs. He smiled. But more importantly, I can teach you that there are no limits to what you can achieve. Not physical, not social, not financial. Limits only exist if you allow them. One of the young people raised his hand. He was a thin boy, no more than 17 years old, with intelligent eyes and a shy posture. Mr. Michael, is it true that those Porsches over there are yours? That your wife bought 5 of them? It's true. How can someone buy 5 Porsches if they've been poor their whole life? That's a long story, but the short answer is, my wife never gave up. She never stopped believing that our dreams mattered. And when the opportunity came, she seized it. Michael looked at each of the young people. Opportunities come to everyone at some point. What defines who you will be is whether you are prepared to seize them when they come. The classes began. Jason taught the practical part, working directly with the students on the vehicles. Michael supervised and taught the theory, explaining each system, each operating principle. Melissa managed the project, handling the bureaucratic part and the relationship with the sponsors. But not everything was smooth. Some young people didn't take the course seriously. They missed classes. They didn't pay attention. One of them was caught trying to steal parts from the Porsches to sell. Michael had to make a tough decision. Brandon, you are expelled from the project, he said to the 19-year-old who had tried to steal. Mr. Michael, please, I need this. I won't do it again. It's not about doing it again. It's about you having done it once. We gave you an opportunity that hundreds of other young people would have liked to have. And you tried to steal from us. But I need money. My mother is sick. Michael sighed. He knew it was true. Brandon came from a very poor family. Brandon, if you needed money, you should have come to talk to us. We could have helped, but you chose to steal. That broke the trust. And without trust, we cannot work together. The young man left with his head down. Melissa, who had witnessed the conversation, approached Michael. That was tough, she said. It had to be. If we let it slide, others will think they can do the same. We have to maintain the standard. But he really needs it. His mother is sick. I know. And I'm going to do something about it. But not here. Not in the project. I'm going to help him in another way, but he can't stay here. That night, Michael called Brandon. Brandon, I'm still upset about what you did, but I understand you were desperate. I'm going to pay for your mother's treatment, but you have to promise me one thing. You're going to find an honest job and work hard. When you prove you've changed, when you prove you can be trusted, I'll personally recommend you for a position at a workshop, but you need to give me time to believe in you again. Brandon cried on the phone. Mr. Michael, I promise I'll work hard. I'll change, thank you. This story spread among the other students. They learned 2 important lessons, that there were consequences for bad choices, but also that there were second chances for those who truly wanted to change. The first semester of the course ended. Of the initial 20 students, 16 completed it. Everyone passed the theoretical and practical exams. Some stood out especially. One of them was Tyler, the shy kid who had asked the question on the first day. He had a natural talent for understanding mechanical systems. He could diagnose problems that even Jason had trouble identifying. "This kid is going far," Michael said to Melissa. "He has the gift, something that can't be taught, you're just born with it." Were you like that? I was. When I was young, I could listen to an engine and know exactly what was wrong. Tyler has that. But he has something more: humility. He's always willing to learn. By the end of the first year, the Dream Workshop was known throughout Los Angeles. The media had covered the story. Reports were done. Melissa and Michael gave several interviews. But with fame also came criticism. Some people said the project was a waste, that teaching mechanics with Porsches was unnecessary showing off, that common cars would teach better because they were what the young people would work on in the real world. Michael responded to these criticisms in an interview that went viral. They say we should use common cars. But I ask, why? Why should poor young people always only have access to the basics? Why can't they learn with the best? When a rich young person learns medicine, they learn in the best hospitals, with the best equipment. When they learn engineering, they use the best labs. Why, when a poor young person wants to learn mechanics, does it have to be with second-class equipment? He paused. Our students work with Porsches because they deserve the best, because when you learn with excellence, you start to demand excellence from yourself. And that mindset, that's what they'll take to any job they do in the future. Michael's response touched many people. Donations started coming in, small amounts from ordinary people who identified with the message. Some smaller companies offered partnerships. The project was growing beyond what Melissa and Michael had imagined. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take the opportunity to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out now continuing. But not everything was good news. A year and a half after the project started, Melissa received a call from the mining company's lawyer. "Miss Melissa, we need to talk urgently." "Did something happen with the shares?" "Not exactly, but there's been a development. The mining company is being sued over environmental issues. They say the quartz reserve exploitation is damaging water springs in the region. The lawsuit could halt the operation." "And does that affect my shares?" "Potentially, yes. If the exploitation is suspended, the share value will plummet. Not to zero, but significantly." Melissa felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. How significantly? It's hard to estimate. But you could lose 60, maybe 70% of the current value. She hung up the phone and stood still for long minutes. She had planned the entire project expansion based on the total value of the shares. If that value dropped drastically... She didn't tell Michael immediately. She didn't want to worry him. She spent the night researching the process, the environmental accusations, the mining company's chances of winning the case. The news wasn't good. The NGO suing the mining company had a strong track record. There was evidence that environmental damage was really occurring. The possibility of suspending operations was real. Melissa did the math. If the shares lost 70% of their value, they would still have enough money to live comfortably. But not enough to keep the Dream Workshop project at its current size. They would have to reduce it. A lot. The next morning, she told Michael. "So we're going to lose almost everything," he said, his voice calm but his eyes showing disappointment. "Not everything. We'll still have enough to live well. We just won't be able to keep the project as it is." "How many students could we keep?" Melissa had done the calculations. "With luck, 20, half of what we have now." "And the other 20, what will happen to them?" "We would have to let them go, or find another sponsor." Michael ran his hand over his face, the gesture revealing his frustration. "We spent the last year promising these young people a better future, and now we have to tell them we can't help them anymore. We haven't lost anything yet. It's just a possibility. The lawsuit might come to nothing. But it might not, and we need to be prepared." They spent the following days in tense silence. Melissa tried to find solutions. She called other companies, looked for new sponsors, but no one wanted to commit to a project that might be about to go bankrupt financially. Margaret, the director who had helped them, was also worried. "Melissa, our company is willing to continue the sponsorship, but we can only cover part of the costs. If your shares really lose value, we'll have to cut the number of students in half." "I understand, and I thank you for continuing to support us. You've done something special here. We're not going to abandon you." But 2 weeks later, the news they feared arrived. The judge ordered the temporary suspension of the mining company's operations until a full environmental study was completed. The estimated time frame was at least 18 months. On the market, the shares plummeted. Overnight, Melissa saw her fortune shrink drastically. They didn't lose 70%, as the lawyer had estimated. They lost 85%. When she saw the final numbers, she sat on the living room floor and cried. Michael came to her and hugged her. "I'm sorry," she said between sobs. "I should have sold the shares when they were still worth something. I should have been more careful. You had no way of knowing, no one did. But now we've lost almost everything, and the project will have to close. It won't close. We'll reduce it, but we won't close it. How are we going to choose which young people to let go? How do we look them in the eye and say there's no more room?" Michael had no answer for that. The next day, they called a meeting with all the students of the Dream Workshop. 40 young people were present, their faces showing concern. Rumors had already spread. Michael took the lead. He explained the situation honestly. He talked about the shares, the environmental lawsuit, the loss of value. He talked about the need to cut the project in half. The silence in the room was deafening. "We're going to have to let 20 students go," he said, his voice heavy. "And the decision of who stays and who leaves will be based on academic performance and commitment to the course." "That's not fair," shouted one of the young people, an 18-year-old boy named Daniel. "Some of us have more difficulty learning, but that doesn't mean we aren't trying." "I know, Daniel, and I know it's not fair, but we have no choice." "There's always a choice," said Tyler, the talented young man who stood out in the group. "Mr. Michael, what if we raise the money ourselves?" "How?" "By organizing events, selling services." "I don't know. There must be a way." "Tyler, we need almost $1 million a year to support 40 students. There's no event or service sale that can raise that. Then we raise it in parts, a little at a time." Michael wanted to explain why that wouldn't work, but he saw the hope in the young people's eyes, and he didn't have the heart to destroy it completely. "All right, you have 1 month. If you manage to raise significant funds, we'll reconsider. But be realistic. 1 month won't change our situation." The young people left the meeting determined. Melissa watched Michael. "You gave them false hope. I gave them hope. False or not, it was what they needed to hear." In the following days, the students of the Dream Workshop organized themselves in ways that surprised everyone. They created a social media group, telling the story of the project. They made videos showing the work they did with the Porsches. They organized a crowdfunding campaign. Tyler had an especially creative idea. They offered a free basic maintenance service for everyday cars on weekends. In return, they only asked for voluntary donations. The news spread. Hundreds of people started showing up with their old cars, wanting to help, and at the same time receive quality service. Jason and some of the more experienced students supervised the work. The newer ones helped and learned, and the donations started coming in. They were small, $20 here, $50 there, but they added up. Melissa was impressed with the initiative, but she knew it wouldn't be enough. "They raised $12,000 in 2 weeks, she said to Michael one night. "It's impressive for a group of young people, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to what we need." "I know, but look at what they're learning. Teamwork, initiative, problem solving. Even if they can't save the project, they're learning valuable lessons." In the 3rd week, something unexpected happened. One of the videos the young people posted went viral. It was a video of Tyler explaining with passion and knowledge how a Porsche's transmission system worked. The video was shared thousands of times, and among the people who saw it was Robert Chambers, a billionaire businessman who owned one of the largest dealership networks in Brazil. Robert was known for his philanthropy, but also for being extremely selective in choosing which projects to support. He called the Dream Workshop personally. "I want to learn about the project," he said. "Can I come tomorrow?" Melissa could barely respond. "Of course, Mr. Chambers. It will be an honor to have you." The next morning, Robert arrived in a black Mercedes. He was a 68-year-old man, tall, with a commanding presence. Michael greeted him personally. "Mr. Chambers, thank you for coming. I saw your student's video. That kid knows what he's talking about." "Where did he learn all that?" "Here, with us." Robert spent the next 3 hours learning about the project. He talked with the students, saw the Porsches, watched practical and theoretical classes, asked difficult questions, tested the young people's knowledge. At the end, he sat down with Melissa and Michael in a small room. "I'll be direct," he said. "This is one of the best social projects I've ever seen. The level of knowledge these young people have is impressive, but you're doing everything wrong." Melissa felt her heart tighten. "Wrong how?" "You're treating this like charity, a project that depends on donations and sponsorships to survive. That's not sustainable in the long run." "But we have no other choice," said Michael. "Yes, you do. Turn this into a business." "A business? But it's a social project." "It can be both. Look, you have highly skilled young people here, young people who know how to work with luxury vehicles. There's a huge market for that. Specialized shops for imported cars charge a fortune and still have waiting lists." Melissa began to understand where he was going with this. "Are you suggesting we open a commercial workshop?" "Exactly. Turn half of this space into a real commercial workshop, serve paying customers, use the revenue to fund the educational part of the project. That way you don't depend on donations." "But the young people are still learning. They can't work on real customers' cars." "The advanced ones can, under supervision, and hire professional mechanics too. Create a structure where the commercial work finances the education. That's how social projects become sustainable." Michael and Melissa looked at each other. It was an idea they had never considered. "But that requires initial investment," said Michael. "Additional equipment, hiring staff, marketing. We don't have that money right now." "I do. I'll invest $2 million in the project. Not as a donation, but as an investment. I want 20% of the business. You keep 80% and full control of the educational part. I come in only as an investor partner for the commercial side." Melissa couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Why would you do this?" "Because I believe you've created something special. And because there's a lot of money to be made in an underexplored market. Specialized luxury car workshops run by people who truly understand not just mechanics, but passion for automobiles." Robert stood up. "Think about the proposal, but don't take too long. Opportunities don't wait." He left, leaving Melissa and Michael in a state of shock. "This would solve all our problems," said Melissa. "It would. But it would completely change the nature of the project. It wouldn't be just education anymore, it would be a business." "And is that bad?" Michael thought for a long moment. "No, it's not bad. In fact, it makes sense. If we're going to teach young people how to work with mechanics, why not also teach them about how a real business works? About customer service, about management, about profitability? Are you saying we should accept?" "I'm saying we should seriously consider it." They spent the night discussing. They weighed the pros and cons. They talked with Margaret, who thought the idea was excellent. They talked with Jason, who was excited about the possibility of running a commercial workshop. The next day, they called Robert. "We accept your proposal," said Michael. "Great. My lawyer will prepare the contract, and we'll start the transformation immediately." The next 3 months were full of intense changes. Half of the warehouse was renovated and equipped as a high-end commercial workshop. 5 professional mechanics with experience in imported cars were hired. A booking system was implemented. Marketing was done focusing on luxury vehicle owners, and it worked, better than they expected. The commercial workshop Dream Mechanics opened with a full schedule. Owners of Porsches, BMWs, Mercedes, and other luxury cars came from all over Los Angeles. The difference was clear. A team that truly understood those vehicles, that treated them with respect and passion, not just as machines. The more advanced students worked in the commercial workshop under supervision, gaining real experience. The newer ones remained focused on their studies, and the revenue generated allowed them not only to maintain the 40 students, but to expand to 60. 6 months after the commercial workshop opened, the project was financially sustainable. It no longer depended on donations or sponsorships. It generated its own revenue. Melissa finally could breathe a sigh of relief. "We did it," she said to Michael one evening. "We really did it. And this is just the beginning." Tyler, the talented student, had become a star in the workshop. At 19, he already had skills that mechanics with decades of experience admired. Robert noticed and offered him a special position. "Tyler, when you complete the course here, I want you to work directly with me. I'll pay for you to study automotive engineering while you work part-time at my dealerships. In 5 years, you'll be one of the best automotive engineers in the country." "Mr. Robert, I don't know what to say." "Say yes." And Tyler said yes. But not everything was victories. Brandon, the young man who had tried to steal parts and been expelled, reappeared. He had gotten a job at a small shop, was working hard. He sought out Michael. "Mr. Michael, remember what you said? That when I proved I had changed, you'd recommend me for a spot." Michael remembered. "Yes, I remember, Brandon. It's been a year. I worked every day. I didn't miss once. My mother is better, thanks to the treatment you paid for. I've changed. I really have changed." Michael studied the young man. He saw sincerity in his eyes. "There's an open position here at the commercial shop. Entry-level pay, but with room for growth. Interested?" Brandon almost fell to his knees. "Interested? Mr. Michael, I'd do anything for this chance." "Then Monday, 7 a.m., you start." Brandon walked out floating. Michael watched from the window. "Everyone deserves a second chance," said Melissa, appearing at his side. "Not everyone makes the most of it. Let's see if Brandon will." And Brandon did. In the following months, he proved to be a dedicated employee, never late, always willing to do overtime, learned quickly. A year later, he was one of the most reliable mechanics in the shop. Meanwhile, the project kept growing. A second class started, then a third. The space became too small. They had to rent an additional warehouse. 2 years after the project's near bankruptcy, the Dream Workshop and Dream Mechanics were benchmarks in Los Angeles. They had graduated 120 young people. 80% of them were employed at quality shops or continuing studies in engineering. But Melissa and Michael didn't stop there. They wanted to expand, take the model to other cities. "If it worked here, it can work anywhere," said Michael. Robert agreed to finance the expansion. Dream Workshop units were opened in Miami, Dallas, and Austin, each following the same model: half social education, half sustainable commercial business. The impact was undeniable. Hundreds of young people were having opportunities they'd never have otherwise. And the quality of the work was so high that Dream Mechanics had a 3-month waiting list. But amid all this success, Melissa noticed that Michael was different, quieter, more introspective. "What's going on?" she asked one night. "Nothing. Why?" "You've been distant, for weeks." Michael sighed. "It's nothing bad. It's just, sometimes I feel useless." "Useless? You created all this." "I supervise, but I can't actually do the work. I can't get under a car. I can't test drive. I see Jason. I see the young guys doing things I used to do, and I feel left behind." Melissa felt a pang in her heart. "Michael, you're the brains of all this. Your knowledge is what teaches these young people. Knowledge isn't the same as practical skill. I miss working with my hands, feeling the engine running under my fingers." Melissa didn't know what to say. It was a pain she couldn't heal, a loss that no amount of money or success could make up for. It was Tyler who had an idea. "Mr. Michael, I've been thinking about something. What if we adapted one of the Porsches so you could drive?" "Adapt how?" "Manual controls. Accelerator and brake controlled by hands instead of feet. It's done for people with paraplegia all the time. I know it exists, but I never thought about doing that with a Porsche." "Why not?" The car is yours. And I can do the adaptation. With supervision, of course, but I can do it. Michael fell silent for a long moment. The idea of driving again, especially a Porsche, was something he had given up as impossible. Do you really think you can do this? I think so. No, I'm sure. And so began a project within the project. Tyler, with help from Jason and some of the more experienced mechanics, began adapting one of the Porsches, the 1985 911, the first one Michael had driven as a passenger. It took 3 months of meticulous work, installing the manual controls, testing safety, making adjustments. Tyler documented everything, turning the adaptation into a graduation project. When it was finally ready, they didn't tell Michael. Melissa brought him to the warehouse with his eyes covered. "Mel, what's going on?" "You'll see." When they removed the blindfold, Michael saw the yellow Porsche, but there was something different. Special controls on the steering wheel. It's your car, adapted for you. You can drive again, said Tyler proudly. Michael couldn't speak. He just cried. Melissa helped him transfer to the driver's seat. He held the steering wheel, felt the controls. "Want to take a ride?" asked Jason. "More than anything." Jason sat in the passenger seat, ready to take control if necessary. Melissa and Tyler stayed in the parking lot, watching. Michael started the engine. The familiar sound of the Porsche filled his ears. He tested the manual controls. Accelerator with the right hand, brake with the left. It was different but functional. Slowly he left the parking lot. He reached the street, and for the first time in almost 4 years, Michael Johnson was driving. Tears streamed freely down his face, but he was smiling like he hadn't smiled in years. "How is it?" asked Jason. "It's perfect, absolutely perfect." They drove for an hour. Michael tested every aspect of the car, the acceleration, the curves, the feeling of freedom he thought he had lost forever. When they returned, Melissa saw something on his face she thought she'd never see again. Fulfillment. "Thank you," he said to Tyler. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever. You gave me a future, Mr. Michael. This is the least I could do." That night, Michael and Melissa sat on the terrace of their new apartment. They had moved a few months earlier to a bigger place, adapted for the wheelchair. "You know, Mel, sometimes I still can't believe everything that's happened in the last few years." "Me neither. If someone had told me that night at the hospital before the surgery that in 5 years I'd be driving an adapted Porsche and running a project that changes the lives of hundreds of young people, I would have thought I was delirious. Life surprises. No, you surprise. You never gave up on the promise. Even when it seemed impossible, even when we lost almost everything, you kept fighting." Melissa held his hand. "I fought because you were worth it, because our dreams were worth it. I love you, more than words can express. I love you too." They sat in silence, watching the city lights. They had been through so much: illness, poverty, humiliation, financial loss, uncertainty, but they had overcome everything. The next morning, Melissa received an unexpected call. It was from the mining company's lawyer. "Mrs. Melissa, I have news about the environmental lawsuit." Bad news? On the contrary, the mining company won the case. The environmental study proved the damages were minimal and could be mitigated with certain measures. The operation was authorized to restart. And the stocks? They've already started to recover. They won't return to their original value anytime soon, but in a year they should be close. Melissa hung up the phone, stunned. They were going to get the money back. Not all of it, not immediately, but they would recover it. She told Michael, expecting him to be excited, but his reaction was different. "You know, Mel, I'm not sure I want the money back." "What do you mean?" "When we lost almost everything, we were forced to be creative, to turn the project into a sustainable business. And look at the result, it's better this way. More solid, more real. If we still had all that stock money, we'd just be spending it, not building something lasting." Melissa thought about it and realized he was right. "So, what do we do with the money when the stocks recover?" "We sell everything and create a fund, a permanent fund that finances scholarships for young graduates of the Dream Workshop who want to go to college. That way the money keeps helping, but in a structured way. That's a beautiful idea. And that's what they did. 18 months later, when the stocks were worth 40% of their original value, they sold everything. They created the Michael and Melissa Johnson Foundation, dedicated to scholarships for alumni of the Dream Workshop. The project continued to grow. 5 years after that day at the dealership, there were Dream Workshop locations in 10 American cities. Over 1,000 young people had graduated. The employment rate was 92%. Melissa and Michael became references in social entrepreneurship. They gave talks, wrote a book telling their story, inspired others to create similar projects in different areas. But the most special moment came on a Saturday afternoon, 7 years after buying the Porsches. Tyler, now graduated in automotive engineering and working as chief engineer at a major automaker, showed up at the Dream Workshop. "Mr. Michael, Mrs. Melissa, I brought someone to meet you." It was a young woman of about 19. She had bright eyes and a notebook under her arm. "This is my younger sister, Emily. She just finished high school. And you know what she wants to do? Mechanical engineering, just like me." Emily was shy but determined. "My brother told me everything you did for him, how you gave him a chance when no one else would. He said if it weren't for the Dream Workshop, he'd probably be working some random job with no future prospects." "Tyler was always talented," said Michael. "We just gave him the tools. But they were tools he wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And now, because of him and your story, I got a full scholarship to study engineering at UCLA. I start next semester. Michael and Melissa were moved." "That's wonderful, Emily," said Melissa. "I wanted to thank you in person, and to say that I'll work hard to honor this opportunity, to show that you didn't invest in vain." After Tyler and Emily left, Michael turned to Melissa. "Did you see? It's not just one young person we helped, it's a whole family. Tyler is inspiring his sister, and Emily will probably inspire others. It's a cycle. That's why we did all this." That night, there was a celebration at the Dream Workshop. It was the 7th anniversary of the project's founding. Hundreds of alumni attended. There were mechanics, engineers, some who had opened their own shops. Robert Chambers, the investor who had saved the project, was there too. "You know, when I invested here, I thought it was just a good business, a chance to profit. But it became much more than that. It became the thing I'm most proud of in my life." Jason, who now managed 3 of the Dream Workshop locations, gave an emotional speech. 7 years ago, I was just a mechanic working in a shop. I had skill, but I had no purpose. When I met Mrs. Melissa that day, when she was being kicked out of the dealership, something told me to help, and it was the best decision I ever made, because it didn't just change her life, it changed mine too." Margaret, the director who had been the first to believe in the project, also spoke. "I once said that I was like these young people, poor with no prospects, and someone gave me a chance. Now, through this project, we are giving chances to thousands, and they, in turn, will give chances to thousands of others. That's generational transformation." Brandon, the young man who had tried to steal and been expelled, asked to speak. "Many here don't know my story. I was expelled from this project in the first year. I tried to steal parts from the Porsches because I was desperate. Mr. Michael would have every right to abandon me. But he didn't. He gave me a second chance and then a third. Today, I'm the manager of one of the commercial shops. I got married last year. My mother is healthy, and none of this would have happened without his compassion." There were few people in the room with dry eyes. Finally, Michael asked to speak. Melissa helped him position the wheelchair in the center of the space. "When Melissa promised me that she would buy 5 Porsches if I survived the surgery, I thought it was the delirium of fear. After all, we were poor. We had nothing. The chance of her getting enough money to buy even 1 Porsche, let alone 5, was 0. People laughed. But she did it. Against all odds, she did it. And when she kept that promise, she gave me more than cars. She gave me back my dignity. She showed me that even in a wheelchair, even without being able to walk, I still had value. I still had dreams worth pursuing." He paused, emotional. But the cars were just the beginning. Because Melissa didn't stop at giving me my dreams. She wanted to give dreams to hundreds of others. And today, 7 years later, I look at all of you, and see what really matters. Not the cars, not the money, but the transformed lives, the families that escaped poverty, the young people who now have a future. And it all started with a simple woman walking into a dealership and asking for 5 yellow Porsches, with salespeople laughing at her, not knowing who they were dealing with. Not a rich woman, but a woman with something much more powerful: determination and love. The room erupted in applause. Melissa stepped up beside him. Michael held her hand. "Mel, I want to ask you a question in front of everyone here, something I should have asked a long time ago." She looked at him, confused. "We've been married for 34 years. It was a simple wedding, no party, nothing special, because we had no money. I always wanted to give you a real wedding celebration, a celebration worthy of our love." He took a deep breath. "So, Melissa Johnson, would you marry me again, in a vow renewal ceremony, with everyone here as witnesses?" Melissa began to cry. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The room exploded with joy, and it was decided right then. In 3 months, there would be a vow renewal ceremony, a big party, with all the former students, sponsors, friends, and family. The 3 months passed quickly. Melissa chose a simple but elegant dress. Michael a new suit. The ceremony would be held in the very warehouse of the Dream Workshop, specially decorated for the occasion. On the day of the ceremony, hundreds of people attended. The space was transformed. Flowers everywhere, soft lights, and the 5 yellow Porsches positioned to form a kind of altar. When Melissa entered, to the sound of soft music, everyone stood up. She walked to Michael, who was waiting for her in front of the yellow cars. The officiant began the ceremony. He spoke about love, about commitment, about overcoming obstacles together. "Michael and Melissa will now renew their vows. Michael, you may begin." Michael held Melissa's hands. "Mel, 34 years ago I promised to love you in wealth and in poverty, in sickness and in health, and I kept that promise. But today, I want to make new promises. I promise to keep dreaming with you. I promise to keep fighting by your side. I promise to never forget that a person's true worth isn't in their working legs or their bank account, but in their heart. And your heart, Mel, is the most beautiful I've ever known." Melissa couldn't stop crying. "Michael, you were my first love. My only love. When you got sick, when the surgery went wrong, many people expected me to leave you. After all, why would a still young woman want to stay with a man in a wheelchair? But those people didn't understand. I didn't fall in love with your legs. I fell in love with you, for your kindness, your passion, your way of seeing the world, and those things never changed." She took a deep breath. "I promise to stay by your side. I promise to keep making dreams come true with you. And I promise to never ever give up on us." There weren't any dry eyes in the room. The officiant declared the vow renewal complete. Michael pulled Melissa in for a long, passionate kiss. The room erupted in applause and shouts of joy. The party that followed was memorable. There was food, music, dancing. The 5 Porsches were on display, each with a plaque telling its story. How the first represented the initial dream, how the second represented perseverance, the third overcoming, the fourth transformation, and the fifth the legacy. Tyler danced with his sister Emily. Brandon danced with his wife. Daniel danced with a new girlfriend. Robert Chambers danced with Margaret. And Michael, in his wheelchair, danced with Melissa. It was a different dance, adapted, but as beautiful as any traditional waltz. Late at night, when most guests had left, Melissa and Michael were alone in the warehouse. They sat side by side, looking at the 5 yellow Porsches illuminated by the soft light. "It was worth it," said Michael. "Everything was worth it. Every tear, every difficulty, every moment of doubt. Yes, it was worth it. If you could go back in time, would you change anything?" Melissa thought for a long moment. "I'd change the surgery, I'd make it work, so you wouldn't have become paralyzed. I wouldn't change it." She looked at him, surprised. "Why not?" "Because if the surgery had worked, I would have gone back to work at the shop. We would have continued our simple life. There wouldn't have been the promise of the Porsches. There wouldn't have been the inheritance of the stocks. there wouldn't have been the dream workshop. He smiled. I lost my legs, but I gained a purpose. I gained the chance to impact hundreds of lives. If I could go back and choose, I'd choose this path again. Melissa hugged him, crying. You're amazing. No. We're amazing. Together. They stayed there for hours, talking, remembering, dreaming about the future. They talked about expanding the project to more cities, about creating a version for young people who wanted to learn other professions, about writing another book, about all the possibilities still to come. When they finally decided to go home, dawn was breaking. Michael drove the adapted Porsche with Melissa in the passenger seat. They crossed Los Angeles in the quiet silence of the early morning. You know, today marks exactly 7 years since that day at the dealership, said Melissa. It really does. The day you walked in covered in dust with a worn-out backpack and asked for 5 Porsches. And everyone laughed. They laughed without knowing who they were dealing with. Melissa smiled. Who were they dealing with? With a woman who never gives up. A woman who turns promises into reality. A woman who sees possibilities where others see impossibilities. Michael stopped at a red light and looked at her. An extraordinary woman disguised as ordinary. They arrived home as the sun began to rise. Melissa helped Michael transfer to the wheelchair. They went up to the apartment, tired but happy. Before sleeping, Melissa picked up the old notebook where Michael had drawn the 5 Porsches decades ago. She flipped through the yellowed pages, looking at the detailed drawings, the passionate notes. These drawings changed many lives, she said. No, you changed many lives. The drawings were just dreams. You made them real. Melissa closed the notebook and placed it on a special shelf. Next to it, she put a photo from their vow renewal ceremony. And beside the photo, she placed a miniature of a yellow Porsche that one of the students had made as a gift. You know, Mel, I always thought the dream was the cars. But it wasn't. The dream was always to have a meaningful life, to make a difference. And we did it. We did. That night, they slept embraced, grateful for everything they had been through, and for all that was yet to come. The following years continued to bring achievements. The Dream Workshop expanded to 20 cities. Over 5,000 young people graduated. The success rate remained impressive. Melissa became an internationally recognized speaker. She told her story at conferences, inspiring others to create sustainable social projects. Michael wrote a technical book on mechanics that became a reference in universities. Tyler got married and had a son. He named the boy Michael, in honor of the man who changed his life. Emily graduated in engineering and went to work for an automotive technology company. Brandon opened his own workshop using the principles learned at the Dream Workshop. Jason became the general director of all project units, and the 5 yellow Porsches, they continued to be used for teaching. Each one had passed through the hands of thousands of young people, each one learning, each one dreaming, each one realizing there are no limits to how far they can go. But the most beautiful story happened 10 years after that day at the dealership. Richard, the arrogant manager who had thrown Melissa out, showed up at the Dream Workshop. He was older, thinner, with grayer hair. He seemed smaller somehow, as if life had taught him humility in the harshest way. Mrs. Melissa, Mr. Michael, I know I have no right to be here, but I needed to come. Richard. It's been a while, said Michael. 10 years. 10 years since I made the biggest mistake of my career, since I treated you with such disrespect. You already apologized back then. You're forgiven. I didn't come just to apologize again. I came to tell you what happened afterward. After your story went viral, after everyone found out how I treated you, I was fired from the dealership. No other company wanted to hire me. I spent 3 years unemployed. I lost my house. I lost my car. I lost my wife, who got tired of my arrogance. Melissa and Michael listened in silence. I ended up working as a cleaner at a small workshop. Me, who had been a manager at a luxury dealership, cleaning bathrooms and sweeping floors. And you know what I learned? I learned that there's no such thing as humiliating work. What's humiliating is treating people badly. What's humiliating is judging someone by their appearance. Why are you telling us this? Asked Melissa. Because I want to ask for a chance, any chance. I can clean the bathrooms here. And I can sweep the floor, anything. I just want an opportunity to be part of something that really matters. Michael and Melissa exchanged glances. Richard, we don't need cleaners, but we do need someone with experience in dealership management, said Michael. But I don't deserve... No one deserves anything, but everyone can earn a chance to change. Michael extended his hand. There's an opening for an operations manager at our new branch in Denver. Modest salary, lots of work, no glamour. Interested? Richard shook Michael's hand with tears in his eyes. More than anything in the world. Monday, 8 in the morning, you start. And Richard, this time, treat every person who walks through the door as if they were the most important person in the world, because they might be. Richard started working at the Denver branch. In the first few months, he was humble, hard-working, and attentive. Slowly, he proved he had truly changed. 2 years later, he was managing 3 branches with efficiency and respect for all employees. He never forgot where he came from. He never forgot the woman covered in dust he had turned away, and who, years later, gave him a second chance when no one else would. Melissa and Michael grew old together. Their hair grew grayer, their wrinkles deepened, but the love between them remained young. On Sunday mornings, Michael still took Melissa for a drive in the adapted yellow Porsche. They drove through the mountains around Los Angeles, feeling the wind, hearing the engine roar, enjoying the feeling of freedom. I still can't believe all this happened, Melissa would sometimes say. It happened because you believed. When no one else believed, you did. On their 50th wedding anniversary, they renewed their vows once more, this time in an even bigger ceremony, with thousands of former students present. The Dream Workshop was now in 50 cities. Over 20,000 young people had graduated. The impact was measurable not only in numbers, but in stories. Stories of families who escaped poverty, of young people who became engineers, entrepreneurs, teachers, of dreams that became realities. And it had all started with a simple promise, a promise made on a fearful night in a hospital, a promise that if love survived, dreams would survive too. Melissa, now 73, was still active in the project. Michael, 75, still taught when his health allowed. They had become legends, not just in Los Angeles, but throughout the United States. Invitations to speak kept coming. Offers to expand internationally appeared regularly, but they were selective. They didn't want the project to lose its essence by growing too big too fast. It's about quality, not quantity, Michael always said. Every young person who comes through here needs to be treated as an individual, not as a number. And they maintained that standard. Every student knew Melissa and Michael personally. Each one heard the story of the 5 yellow Porsches. Each one learned not just mechanics, but values. Respect, humility, determination, compassion. End of story. And you, what did you think of this story? Melissa and Michael turned a promise of love into something that changed thousands of lives. Have you ever been in situations where you were judged by your appearance? Or do you know someone who, like these young people, just needed an opportunity? Leave your opinion in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other moving stories like this one.